So I'm outside the famous La Bombonera Stadium, the home of Boca Juniors, a club that success has made their blue and yellow shirts famous across world football.
But did you know there's actually an interesting legend about how the club came up with these colours? So join me in this video to find out how a moment of fate led Boca Juniors to these shirts. To delve properly into this story, it is important to look back at the foundations and early days of Boca Juniors. It was founded on the 3rd of April 1905 by a group of Italian immigrants, meaning they just celebrated their 120th birthday. The act of forming a football club during that time in Argentina was nothing out of the ordinary. However, it would have been nearly impossible to predict that a team coming out of the working class La Boca neighbourhood of Buenos Aires would become arguably Argentina's most successful club over the following century. But long before that history had played out, the club actually played in different colours. During the club's early days, the club decided that they would play in a black and white striped shirt. Think Newcastle United, who were a massive team at the time, and also Notts County in Nottingham. Their first game was against Darsena Sud, which they won 4-0. And for the following 2 years after that match, the club played in these black and white shirts. However, at that time, another club called Nottingham de Almagro also bore the same colours. Just like we mentioned, Notts County also did at the same time, but there is little evidence that there's actually a connection between the two teams. But as Argentina is a country of football and folklore, you never know, and the similarities are uncanny. But because of this other team, Boca found themselves in a difficult situation. Now in the present day, this wouldn't be a problem, but in the earliest 20th century, when football was still developing, the situation of two clubs having the same colour shirt made it almost impossible to play matches. Think about it, footballing kits were still in short supply and the concept of an away shirt had yet to be developed. So if two teams did have similar colours and had to play each other a match, well, you can see where the problem would arise. But how would you settle this then if two clubs wanted to play in the same colours? The solution in that scenario back in 1906 was actually fairly simple. A winner takes all match. The winner would get to keep the black and white striped shirt while the loser had to change. As you may have guessed, Boca lost this winner takes all game. But despite losing the match, it would all be a blessing in disguise for Boca Juniors. Because shortly after losing this match, the legend goes that Juan Roman, one of the first members of the club's board of directors and president at the time, needed to figure out a way of finding a new set of colours that everyone would agree on. And to do this, Roman is said to have come up with a cunning plan of how to choose these colours, which would be fair and completely at random. This plan would involve taking a short walk down to the port of La Boca, which we can see here is extremely close to where La Bombonera Stadium is now situated. The port itself was one of the major entry points to the early Argentinian state. It is estimated that between 1870 and 1930, 6 million European immigrants arrived at the port to make Argentina their home. It was also used primarily by merchant ships, and this gives us a little hint to what Roman's plan was. It is said that he was standing somewhere along the stretch of water here in La Boca and decided that the first boat that would come into port, he would look up at the mast and see what flag the boat had. And the first boat to sail into port had the flag of Sweden. Yes, the blue and yellow of Sweden. Now you can see here where those connections come together. And it said that he went back to the club with these colours, said that we want to play in blue and yellow, and it was something that the other members of the club actually liked. And the rest, of course, they say is history, but there's a lot more that we can go into detail about. The first kits that Boca wore after choosing their new colours looked like this. Firstly, when looking at this kit, you might notice a slight difference to today's kits. That's because they were initially designed with a diagonal line going across the shirt, rather than the horizontal stripe you'd recognise from these iconic shirts. Now, if you have an interest in Argentinian football, you may notice that this kit has something similar with another kit in the country, that of arch rivals River Plate. So it probably was for the best that in 1913 the club changed to their now iconic style of shirt with the horizontal stripe placed across it. And what a decision that would be, especially given how Boca as a club has given world football some of its most iconic shirts to date, these being just a few of my favourites throughout the years. The club did pay homage to the old style though, as in 2005 the club played in a special diagonal line shirt to celebrate its 100-year anniversary. And that's not the only tribute made to the club's past, as over the years a string of commemorative shirts have been released to do so. Check out this one from 2011 when the club released a black and white striped shirt to mark those colours that were lost against Nottingham de Almagro. And that kit also integrated a stripe across the shirt. The recognition of their past has also not been lost on the fans. If you get a chance to go to La Bombonera or even just watch the matches online, you'll see the Swedish flag nestled in and amongst the fans, amongst the array of all those other flags, of course. This is just one example of how Boca fans are extremely passionate about their origins and their history as a whole. This story for me just encapsulates Argentinian football. I mean, just think about it. If Boca had gone into that game against Nottingham de Almagro to win the rights to those black and white shirts, and they won, where would we be now? Would I be sat here with this shirt on? Would we have known Boca to become one of the best teams in Argentina? We'll never know. But it's crazy that if they'd actually won the game as they wanted to, history would have played out completely different. And as a perfect example how even a defeat can lead to positives. And as well, if Juan Brachetto hadn't have taken a walk down to the port of La Boca that day, just as a ship from Sweden was coming in, what would have happened to Boca Juniors? Once again, would I be sat here with these colours? Or could I have potentially been sat with a shirt which is like the green of Ferro, or even the red and black of Newell's Old Boys? I mean, we will never know. Like many stories in Argentinian football though, we could always just put it down to fate. Boca Juniors and their shirts were first really seen by European eyes during a 1925 tour of the continent, which has gone down as iconic in the club's history. They played teams like Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, and brought their now iconic shirts with them. And this has been another video from the Partido, the channel where we talk about stories from the Spanish-speaking footballing world in English. As always, if there's any ideas, if there's anything you want me to cover on this channel, let me know. And as we always say here, nos vemos in the next video.